I've learned also that the best kinds of friendships are ones where you just feel comfortable and that you don't have to go out of your way to maintain a friendship or bend your life around to please someone else. But, family at the end of the day is so, so, so important. And that's who, Carrie and I are going to grow old together. And I think realizing that it's hard for young people because, look at them, they're vaping, they go crazy, they're acting like, I'm sorry, I sound like such a nerd, but mortality is not, God, it sounds so depressing, but mortality is not on the minds of a lot of young people, which is great because, they're young and they should be happy and enjoying life. But I think it's important to realize you're going to get older, and who do you want to spend your life with and, raise your children with?
Hello, everyone. I'm Denise Couric. Welcome to Bite Your Tongue, the podcast. Thanks for joining us as we speak with experts, authors, parents, and even young adults to explore the transition from parenting our young children to building healthy relationships with our now adults. Hopefully we'll grow together, learn about ourselves, our young adults, and of course, when to bite our tongues. We are so happy you're with us, so let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Bite Your Tongue, the podcast. We have an amazing episode today. Today, we're going to explore sibling relationships and a few other important topics with two pretty famous siblings. You'll have to stay tuned to learn who they are and hear more. I'm also so excited that Ellen's joining me again today. She's back from Prague, and as I mentioned in the last episode, her book is done and available for pre-order on Amazon. I'll put a link in it in the episode notes. Before Ellen joins me, I just want to say how proud I am of her and this book. The title, Bright Kids Who Couldn't Care Less. It's a topic we've all dealt with when they were young and even now as young adults. As I mentioned in other episodes, many listeners have written to us about adult kids who just aren't launching. We know they're bright, but frankly, they couldn't care less. I'm hoping we'll be able to spend an episode talking about this with Ellen and about her book. And as you know, Sheryl Sandberg wrote the foreword. There will be so much to talk about. So now on with today's show. Ellen, I am so glad you're here today. I can't even tell you.
Finally, I'm here. I'm back from Prague. I'm here. I finally finished my book. Well, I mean, it's finished. I have to get the last edits actually tomorrow to my publisher, and it'll be out in March. And I will be so excited to talk about that because when I started writing the book, it was right before the pandemic, and I thought I was writing a book about kids who were unmotivated, and then what do you know? The whole world is unmotivated, especially kids who are launching into adulthood. I think that's the biggest.
Or not living up to their potential. And so many of our listeners are writing about kids not living up to their potential, parents' expectations not being met. That's a whole nother issue. But you don't know this, Ellen, but at the beginning I talk about your book. So I told everybody about it and we're thrilled. And I'm just so happy you're here with us today. And for those listeners that don't know, my husband and I are hoping to visit Ellen in Prague in March, and we're hoping to do an episode from there. So that will be fun.
I know. I'm going to hold you to it, Denise.
But let's get on with today, okay?
Okay.
I have so much to say about today. So today we're talking to Ellie and Carrie Monahan. And some of you might know they're the daughters of Katie Couric, an American journalist and author. I reached out to them after listening to their new podcast called All Each Other Has. They drop episodes every Wednesday, and I really look forward to listening. I actually try to listen to a lot of podcasts hosted by young adults. It helps, as the host of this podcast, understand their life issues, and it gives me ideas of what we should talk about. It also keeps me current. In fact, the most recent episode I listened to was part of a series on New York private schools. I'm embarrassed to say I learned a new word, and I'm not sure I'm going to say it right. They can come on and correct me. Carrie uses the word misogynoir and says everyone should know the word. Well, not me. We've all heard of being misogynistic, but misogynoir is directed towards Black women where race and gender play a role. I feel like the older I get, the smaller my bubble gets. And I feel like it's so important that we all stay current. It keeps us young. Anyway, let's get to why we're talking to them today. What grabbed us was the episode title, All Each Other Has. On the podcast, they say when they would fight or argue, their mother would always say, "You're sisters, you're all each other has." It struck me because I think as parents of adult children, it's the one thing we all hope for, that our kids are close, especially after we are gone, because frankly, they're all each other has. So we can't wait to talk to them today about their sibling relationship. And we're also going to talk about how impacted they were about losing their father at such a young age. We'll also talk about how it felt to them as young adults to welcome a stepfather into their lives. And now, as many of you have heard, their mom, Katie Couric, was recently diagnosed with breast cancer. She's doing great, but hearing this news must have rocked their world. Okay, Ellen, I'm babbling on and on again. Why don't you introduce our guests?
Yes. I don't want to take any more time because I'm really interested in what they have to say. I always think about these sibling relationships, and they are the relationships that are the least resistant to change or the least likely to change throughout our life.
Yeah, you're right.
They're also the longest relationships we have in our lives. And Denise, you and your sister have such a close relationship, and I'm so eager to hear about Ellie and Carrie's take on their relationship and also learn more about their podcast. So, welcome, Ellie and Carrie.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Hi, I'm Ellie. Thank you guys so much for having us. We were really touched when Denise reached out to us after only a few episodes of our podcast were dropped, wanting to talk to us, wanting to bring us on here. So thank you. We're really excited.
And Carrie?
And hi, I'm Carrie. Thank you for having me. Oh, I wanted to say that it's misogynoir.
Misogynoir. Say that again for me.
Misogynoir. And it's a term coined about a decade ago by a woman named Moya Bailey. And it's sort of a term that has to do with intersectionality and or it's grounded in intersectionality, I should say. And if you want to learn more about that, you can read Moya Bailey or also Kimberly Crenshaw talking about it, kind of the intersection between gender, race, class, disability, etc. But yeah.
Okay, I looked it up on Wikipedia, but Carrie, every episode I learn a new word from you.
Me too.
But also I should let our listeners know Carrie can be very blunt, and it's what I like about her. So tell us how the podcast came to be.
Sure, I'll start. So a few months ago, or was it a few months ago? I guess so. I live in Los Angeles, so all the months blur together for me because there's no seasons. But Carrie called me, and at the time she wasn't completely fulfilled by her job and was just feeling a little moralist, and that she had a lot to say about different issues, high culture and low culture, everything from John Berger's ways of seeing to the Real Housewives reunion, or Girls Trip rather. And she wanted a platform to do it on. And so I said, well, maybe we could try podcasting, because I knew some people in LA who had started them, and it seemed like a very low barrier to entry. You just need to buy a microphone, which we did on Amazon, and a subscription to an online studio.
No, Ellie, we did it through B&H, not my.
Oh, I'm sorry, B&H. But we ordered it online.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and then we were off to the races, and Carrie brought in a friend of hers from journalism school to do the editing. And so that's sort of how we got started. But Carrie, tell us more about, where that drive came from.
And how you came up with the name and that sort of thing.
Carrie can take it over.
I think it was Ellie that came up with the name. And I don't think it could have been named anything else. I think, as I'm guessing, discuss later on in this program, Ellie and I fought a lot growing up, not just, verbally, but physically. And at times it was really scary. And our mom would get super upset. I have this memory, Ellie, when we went on that trip to the Atacama Desert in Chile.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I had found out that you had smoked a cigarette. I think you were maybe in ninth grade, and you'd been caught I mean, it was months earlier. I don't know how I found out about it during that trip, but I was so, I'm anti-smoking now, but when I was little, I mean, I would cough if someone was smoking on the street while walking past them. I was like really intense and judgmental. Well, it was a public health crisis, and we came of age during Bloomberg's time as mayor.
Mhm.
So, but I still do remember like smoking sections in restaurants, and I'm going off on a tangent as usual. Anyways, I found out that Ellie had smoked a cigarette in our apartment, and I freaked out, and we got in a huge fight, and I think we were sharing a room, Ellie, and Ellie would like grow her nails out. And I don't think it was for the purpose of hurting me, but I just remember the nails in my thigh and me hitting her on the head and trying to call the front desk for help. And I guess mom came in or something. And I mean, that was a moment I remember her saying, "Stop, your sisters. You're all each other has." And I mean, I have tons of memories like that. But we're friends now, Ellie and I. So
I want to hear about how that came. And I imagine your mom fought with her sisters a lot. Or she had one sister, is that right, or two?
Two.
So, funnily enough, Mom is the youngest of four, and her oldest sister Emily, who passed away in 2001 from pancreatic cancer, she was 9 years older than Mom. So there was quite
10.
9 or 10. Yeah, I think you're right, Carrie, 10. And so their relationship was almost like parent-child. There was such a big gap. And her sister Kiki, I want to say, is 7 years or 8 years older than Mom. So she really fought with her brother Johnny, who is 2 to 3 years older. It's bad. I don't know the exact age differences, but she, I think her sisters, they probably fought between the two of them. But she fought more with our Uncle Johnny.
But they also had a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely.
So remind me the age difference between the two of you.
4.5 years, 5 grades.
5 grades, 4.5 years. So we want to hear what brought you together. Like, I have a boy and a girl, 30 and 33. Ellen has 2 kids about the same ages, and they live in different places. All we want is for them to be close.
It's so true, Denise. It's so true. It's like if I had one wish for the future, it would be that my kids knew that they were all each other has, because it's really
exactly true. So take us through your journey a little bit.
Sure. I think having lost our father when I was 6 and Carrie had only just turned 2, I think for most of my life I adopted, or so I've learned in therapy, and I think therapy is a big reason why we have gotten closer over the past 5 years or so. But my therapist told me that when a child loses a parent, and they're the older sibling, they kind of adopt a parental role, or it sort of forces them to kind of grow up. And I think that I became a partner to my mom at a younger age. And I just wanted to support her. And in that way, I was exerting an inappropriate amount of, I was telling Carrie what to do. And that wasn't really my place. I was parenting my sister when we should have just been on equal footing. So I think realizing that, and then, frankly, I think I was just, I was an awkward middle schooler, and I had this, kid sister who wanted to come everywhere with me and my friends. And, I was always like, Mom, do I have to take her? And all my friends had older sisters, and I was so jealous. But, I think that that was sort of our relationship growing up, a combination of our dad dying and it changing the dynamic in our family. And then also just, being so far apart in age.
What's so interesting in hearing this is that my kids are exactly the same age difference as yours, and similar sort of dynamic, even without the trauma that you experienced. It's so common when there's that big age difference for the older one to sort of act like a know-it-all.
I do think that dynamic is common. But anyway, Carrie, we interrupted you, and you're who we want to.
Oh, no, that's okay. I was just going to say that, I think also the fact that I have no memory of our dad because I was so young, and in some ways didn't really, I feel like, experience this shared trauma that my sister and mom did, because, the very fact that I was 2 made me feel kind of excluded from, their shared memory of my dad. So I don't know. I think I often felt like, and I probably in many ways did this to myself, and we have narratives that we tell ourselves about who we are, and maybe sometimes they're not fully accurate, or they become, filtered through time or whatever. But I think that I felt that they had this bond and I wasn't really part of it. And it wasn't that they actively excluded me in any way. I think our mom really did a good job of trying to teach me about my dad and keeping his memory alive, and she continues to do that. But I think that was also probably part of it.
I have to ask, what changed things? When did things change for you? And was there a catalyst? It sounds like you've all worked very hard to just cherish these relationships that you do have. But what changed from, the fingernails and the thighs to loving each other in the open way that you do now?
Well, I think, funnily enough, getting married, I feel like ushered in a new era for our family where, we went from being children to adults. And I know it wasn't Carrie's wedding or anything, but I think, we both graduated from college. Carrie went to journalism school, and we entered into adulthood, and we were finally both adults. And that I feel like was more of a shared experience than any other time in our life, because when I graduated high school, Carrie was in 7th grade, and 12th grade and 7th grade, when you're in it, I mean, there's a huge crevasse in between those two things. And so now we were in the same sort of phase of our lives. I had been going to therapy and realizing that I was just trying to control her too much and monitor her behavior too much. And I just took a step back and I just chilled out, I think, and realized, my sister's her own person and she's going to do what she wants to do, and everyone's on their own path, and that's fine. And I would say, this wedding we were planning for 2.5 years because of COVID. And I don't know, it sounds silly to pin it on an event, but Carrie just was so unbelievably helpful and mature, and she wrote this beautiful speech. She sang, and I just felt like finally we were just on the same, level, and just feeling relaxed and comfortable with who we were as individuals, and comfortable with our relationship as sisters too.
Well, I feel like it started a little earlier than that, at least for me.
Of course.
I felt like when I was in college and Ellie would visit me, I think for one, being in an environment where I was kind of in control created a different dynamic that I think was helpful for us in some ways, because I was the one who knew where we were going and organizing what, who we were seeing and what we were doing. And I also, I guess, gained a newfound appreciation for Ellie and realized that the thing I love most about her, and I said this in my speech at her wedding, but is her willingness to, I guess, continue seeing the world with wonder. And, she, because of what we experienced at a young age, because of the way we grew up, because of who our mom is, she could have become a very jaded sort of person. And she's just so not. She, almost to a fault, is obsessed with making other people happy, but also more than that, about making other people feel comfortable and included. And just, she's not the kind of person. Ellie is not very cool, which is what makes her cool. No, I just mean that, like,
No, I get it.
She is willing to, I don't know, be vulnerable with people and just be friendly and open. And I remember we went to this party at Stanford, and it was in the spring of my junior year, I think, and she was visiting me. And by this point, at my time at Stanford, I, had ventured into other sort of alternative communities, at least socially. And I just saw her in a setting with people I knew she didn't typically interact with. And frankly, I didn't really either. And we went to this spring festival where most people, I think, were on LSD. And, there was a man playing the didgeridoo. There were people in a yurt. I didn't live there, but we were going to a party there. And she just was completely, I think even more so than I was. And I had been to this place before, just like completely open to talking to people and without judgment. And I don't know, and this is a long story, but I think that was a key moment for me. Just, I love watching Ellie, and Mark said this, I think, in his vows too, Ellie's husband. I love watching Ellie meet new people and interact with people and seeing them react to her kindness. It's something that's really special and honestly remarkable about her, is her willingness to make other people feel loved and accepted, and that she genuinely cares about them within a few seconds of meeting her.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I just think I've learned to appreciate so many things about Ellie that maybe I didn't when we were younger, and maybe that's part of it. And honestly, the pandemic, for whatever reason, even though we weren't quarantining together, anything brought us much closer, wouldn't you say, Ellie?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm smiling from ear to ear right now. That is so sweet to hear you say about me. I mean, I think too, for me, Carrie took her studies extremely seriously in college. She was an American Studies major, and for her thesis, she spent time in the small town of Eufaula, Alabama, where our mom's family traces its ancestry back to. And, the level of dedication she put into her research there, interviewing people and looking through the records and, staying actually in our ancestral family home with the wonderful Miss Ann Smith. And I think the same goes for Carrie. I feel like her entire raison d'etre is to tell stories, of the marginalized, of the oppressed, always getting the other point of view that hasn't necessarily been portrayed. And I think that's what drives our podcast a lot. And I was so pleased we had so many interesting women phone in, or we were able to feature them in our series about private schools. And that's something I've really enjoyed seeing in Carrie too.
We really want to know also what role your mom played in this, because that's important to our listeners.
Definitely.
What I'm hearing from both of you is you almost realized something special about the person and then worked to understand it and come together. Ellie through the therapy, Carrie probably through therapy and also experiences. Everything you're saying I hear on your podcast. I see Ellie as the pleaser, Carrie as the I don't want to say
the provocateur,
but but it worked. I think, oh my gosh, these two women are so different. What makes their relationship work? And so I sort of understand that now. But did you do this all on your own? Our audience and parents of adult kids, is there any role they can play in helping their kids find their way to each other, like you found your way to each other?
Yeah, Denise, I have to second that question, because as I'm hearing your story and loving it, because you grew up and you found the goodness in each other, basically. Mm-hmm. What can we do as parents when our kids are having trouble with that process or feel like they'll never see the goodness in each other as they're approaching into adulthood?
Both of my kids love each other. They're close. They talk to each other. But a week could go by that they don't talk to each other.
Oh my gosh. Mm-hmm. My kids, Denise, 2 months could go by. There are lots of siblings. They don't, especially if they live in different parts of the country and different time zones. It's hard.
Well, I hate to say that, I don't think you can force it. I think that's the most important thing. And I think that the siblings need to arrive at that realization on their own. But I think growing older, losing grandparents, in our case, a father, our mom dealing with breast cancer this summer. I think all these things put things into perspective and make you realize how important family is. I think for so much of my life, with my being such an anxious people pleaser, I was obsessed with friends, always wanted to make sure I had friends and that I was putting a lot into those relationships. And friends are wonderful. And I've learned also that the best kinds of friendships are ones where, you just feel comfortable and that you don't have to go out of your way to maintain a friendship or bend your life around to please someone else. But family at the end of the day is so, so, so important. And that's who, Carrie and I are going to grow old together. And I think realizing that it's hard for young people because, look at them, they're vaping, they go crazy. They're acting like, I'm sorry, I sound like such a nerd, but mortality is not, God, it sounds so depressing, but mortality is not on the minds of a lot of young people, which is great because, they're young and they should be happy and enjoying life. But I think it's important to realize, you're going to get older, and who do you want to spend your life with and, raise your children with? And so I think it just happens naturally. Carrie, please.
I think also Ellie and I have shared interests. Like we both studied the same thing in college. She is a TV writer. I am who knows what, but something in journalism and filmmaking or whatever. Cultural commentary. I'm very moralist and pretty depressed, to be
No,
honest.
you need a TV show written all about you, Carrie, because you're the model of what many young adults struggle with. So you do it in a funny,
great.
No, but you do it in a funny, intelligent, remarkable way. That's why I think it needs to be a show. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, thank you. But I think also Ellie and I guess a hallmark of our closeness is we laugh a lot together, and I don't know. I guess that is in part thanks to our mom. I think much of our senses of humor come from our mom's goofiness and also sleepaway camp. So that was something thanks to our mom. I think a huge part of our personalities has to do with our, many years spent at sleepaway camp.
How often do you see each other in person? I know she's in California, you're in New York. How often does the family come together as a whole?
Well, I think when we see each other, it's not necessarily like the whole family coming together. I enjoy visiting Ellie in Los Angeles, and I'll just go for a couple of days. And now that she and Mark have a house, I stay in their guest room. And when Ellie comes to New York, yes, she's coming to see me and mom. But lately she stays with me in Brooklyn. And I think Ellie enjoys doing that, even though she's allergic to my cats. We keep Zyrtec here. But I think that's nice for Ellie too, because as we've discussed, I think in an early episode of the podcast, and we'll also discuss actually tonight in an episode we're recording, but Ellie had a really hard time in high school. And I think because of that, for many years, has not enjoyed being in New York, especially because our mom more or less still lives in the neighborhood that we grew up in. And so many parts of growing up were wonderful. But I think Ellie gets a sense of social anxiety when she comes back to New York. Mm-hmm. And that's hard. And I understand that. And I definitely sometimes feel that too. But I live in Clinton Hill in Brooklyn, and it's just a completely different experience of New York City than the way we grew up, and just totally different surroundings. So I think she enjoys that, and she likes being in Brooklyn with me. But I think we probably see each other, every 2 months, maybe.
Yeah, I would say so. I definitely miss her when we go too long. But we had talked about her. I'm in Toronto for work, and we had talked about Carrie coming up this weekend. But it just was too much for her to swing. Her roof, unfortunately, had a big leak, and some of it broke into her apartment. So it was a crazy week for Carrie. But so we're also understanding when it's like, you know what, I just can't swing that trip. But it is so fun to have her out in LA. I love Brooklyn. It's so fun. The past couple times I've gone to New York, I've never even gone into Manhattan, which I feel like is pretty cool of me. And yeah, she just, when she wants, she'll get on a flight at JFK and come to LAX. I'm like 15 minutes away from the airport and have a proper guest room. And our mom is also really understanding about things. I'm having Thanksgiving at my house with some friends, and Carrie's going to come out for it. My husband has to work on Friday, and traveling right now is just so insane and expensive. So Carrie's going to come out for that, which is really nice. And our mom is really happy to see us become so close,
So I think there's something to be said, the way you said Carrie's coming out for Thanksgiving without building that independent relationship that's not with the rest of the family sounds really important to me. And it sounds like it is to you too. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You don't have the judgment of mom around, my kid, I'm not saying your mom, any adult parent, you're not, you don't have any of that. You can be yourself. You're doing your own thing. You don't have to worry about the serving platter at Thanksgiving. You don't have to worry about how the napkins are folded. You just do your thing, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And I think family dynamics become more complicated when there are more people.
Oh, you're right. You're absolutely right.
In some ways that will often actually bring Ellie and me closer together.
Ellen, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to ask a question about other kinds of relationships. And I'm going to ask this very selfishly for a lot of people who are going through this. And that is that you got a new stepdad and step siblings as adults. I think that there's so much that happens when parents are dating and they have adult children and they have significant relationships. What was the secret to your success? And what kind of guidance would you give to other parents going through what you've gone through? What did you learn from it?
Ellie, should I go? Do you want to?
You can go.
I think there are a lot of things that I appreciate about my stepdad, and that I know my mom appreciates too. And I love his parents who have become, bonus grandparents to us. I just had dinner and went to a performance on Friday with his mother. And I think the advice I would give is when we were little and I would think about, if my mom got remarried, I'd want him to be this, that, and the other. That is realistically not going to happen. Your step parent might not be the person that you idealized or the person that you dreamt up for your parent or for yourself, right? And I think that's okay. I think accepting people as they are and finding things that are wonderful about them is really important. And that's a skill that goes beyond just your step parent. That goes into relationships with so many people. I mean, maybe not necessarily a romantic partner, but certainly your family. I'd say mostly your family, I guess, because you can more choose your friends. But I think that's helpful advice. That's been something that's been super helpful for me in my relationship with my stepdad.
So I'm going to bring this full circle for a minute here, Carrie. Earlier in the podcast, you said you felt, like your mom and Ellie were kind of a team because they knew your dad. They had a different kind of relationship with that death sort of thing. I wonder a little bit if this drew you closer to Carrie, because now your mom has a relationship and it's not your dad. I'm not sure I'm saying this right.
No, I get it.
Do you get it? Yeah. And I wonder whether it brings you closer to, even though Ellie has Mark, my guess is something you adore and he welcomes you because you're in their guest room or you're whatever. And to me, when I found my spouse, my most important thing was that he had to love my sister because my sister came with the package and he was kind to her. And it sounds like Mark is that way too. But it might have brought you closer to Ellie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think definitely. Our mom had often described the three of us as being like a three-legged stool, right, Ellie? Yeah. And as much as I felt at times that my mom and Ellie were maybe closer with each other because Ellie was kind of a partner to mom, I also definitely felt like we were like that three-legged stool. And I think obviously mom has dated people in the past. I think it's interesting that, prior to John, I think it's interesting that I was always the one who had issues with my mom's boyfriends, and it wasn't really Ellie. And maybe that was also because the age I was at when my mom had a live-in boyfriend. You can read about it in Going There. But he and I didn't get along at all, and maybe that was because I was like 12 and 13 years old. But I think having that trio kind of interrupted, and yes, Ellie's married as well, but that's kind of different. Definitely brought Ellie closer to me. What do you think, Ellie?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I have a nice relationship with our stepdad. And I'm
You have a nice relationship
grateful.
with everyone, Ellie, it sounds like, but go ahead.
not with everybody. But I'm really happy that mom has someone, to be with and grow old with. They're in Spain right now and look like they're having a great vacation. And living so far away, I worry less. We're able also to enjoy each other more as adult siblings because we can spend Thanksgiving without her because we know
Right.
she'll be with John and his family and she won't be alone. And so that's a big relief. Advice for parents getting remarried. I mean, it's a very emotional thing. Whether you dealt with the death of a spouse or divorce, because I was a year out of college when the day that mom told us that she was engaged, and I immediately just broke into tears, and I think I was a little blindsided because she had always said, what would be the point of getting married at my age? It's not like I want to have more children. And so I just never thought it was really in the cards for her. I was hoping that she would, meet a partner. And it's wonderful that it's official and she has a husband and a real legal partnership too. But so that was an intense day. Carrie and I both remember it pretty well, I think. I wish that John had maybe told us about it ahead of time. It was completely in his rights to, he wanted to keep it romantic. He isn't someone who really likes to tell people a lot. He had it planned and he wanted to do it his way, which I totally respect. I was definitely a little shocked when I saw this beautiful ring on mom's finger. And I think it reverted me back to that 6-year-old girl, who lost her father. And so I think no matter how old your kid is, you have to remember like this is tapping into a childhood trauma and and needs to be handled delicately. Not to admit that I watched this, but on the most recent season of The Kardashians,
Oh gosh.
Travis Barker and Kourtney get engaged, and Kris Jenner doesn't invite Kourtney's children to the engagement party that night. They're not included, and she's like, well, they're really young, and she gets on the phone with her daughter, and her daughter just starts crying, and I was like, oh my God, I get that. I think it's really important to involve children in these conversations, even though it might not be the most romantic thing. It's because you really are marrying a family. And we were obviously we were out of the house by the time this happened. And, because Carrie actually was at the end of high school when this happened. But yeah, I would say it's always a sensitive thing.
I think that's really good advice, though. You're just asking to be informed. I mean, two things I think that listeners can take away from this. One is that if you are thinking of getting engaged, talk to the kids before so they're not shocked by it. And the other thing is, as a parent, be open to the fact that your children, the best they can do is maybe radical acceptance, and that's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
So many of us in adulthood think like, oh, we're going to create a whole new family. It's going to be wonderful for everybody. And that might not be the right bar to have in mind.
Yeah, definitely. It's not going to be like the Brady Bunch. But at the same time, we talked about this on our podcast because I grew up watching Cinderella and all these movies where there's an evil stepmother.
Parent Trap.
Parent Trap was so when I was younger, when Carrie was really little and mom was starting to date, I was obsessed with like the idea of sabotaging it, and I would sneak out of my room at night and like spy on the, whoever she was seeing. And, and I would, listen in on her phone conversations. Like it was like really crazy stuff. I think it was me trying to work through those feelings. I remember we were walking down the street one day with her boyfriend and they were holding hands. And I remember pulling their hands apart. I was just, at that age where it seems like this is really not okay with me. And so, to bring it full circle, I think the night I heard that they were engaged, to me, it really solidified that my father is gone, like really and truly gone. And we're fully moving forward. And, that was, 15 years after the fact. But I just remember that night, I just like couldn't stop crying and I didn't really understand why. And I think that's sort of why. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I was also really excited for them, but I did have this very emotional, visceral reaction that I couldn't control.
Well, it changes your life dramatically right at that point. Mm-hmm. Your whole lives change. And I think all of parents have to understand that.
I think what you're saying too is for every one of these situations, there was a break in the family fabric. And regardless of how it happened, as an adult, you have to think about that in your kids. Like they're going to have to not only accept what's coming, but they've got to reprocess what happened in a way that the adult might not be aware of at all.
Yeah, like they might need some time and it's okay.
Exactly. All right, let's get to full circle because this goes right to it. Some of our sort of general questions we ask young adults, and this is, if you're dating someone, and should adult parents tell their kids if they're not happy with who they're going out with and maybe forming a future with?
I think it depends on the reason why you don't like them. If you don't like them because you observe that your child doesn't seem happy or they don't seem to treat your child with kindness or respect, then yeah, I would want to be told that. If it's more like for superficial reasons or I don't like that he didn't go to a quote unquote good college, or that I don't like that your girlfriend, I don't know, isn't from the right family or something. I have friends who don't like their siblings' partners, not for silly reasons, but because they think that their sibling is unhappy with that person and the best is not being brought out of them. And I think I know a lot of people recently who are ending relationships that for years it turns out were unhappy in, but they felt stuck because I think the longer you're in a relationship, obviously the harder it is to get out. But I think luckily this isn't the case with Ellie and Mark, but I think if I dated somebody who, I think Ellie is a good judge of character, who didn't seem kind to me, I would definitely want Ellie to say something.
Yeah. And I think, for the most part, I mean, Carrie has such a strong sense of self and is so confident that I don't think you would ever be with someone who puts you down or makes you feel bad. I think you have strong self-esteem. I know it's not always super strong like any human, but I think it's also important to give your child or sibling or friend the space to figure it out, and maybe they'll bring someone around and you're like, that's an interesting choice, or, we'll see what happens. But, that interesting choice could very well end up being their life partner and develop into something that you never expected. Like I have a couple friends that, that ended up with people that are so vastly different from the types of guys or girls they went out with in college. It's like I never pictured them together, but they make sense now. So I think it's just about giving someone the space and time to figure it out on their own too.
But love is a weird thing. And as a parent looking in, it's very, very hard.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I think it's really tough for parents. I mean, even in situations, and I think this is very superficial, friend's child is dating someone who already has 2 children from 2 different dads, and the fellow seems fine. It's a lot to deal with.
Right.
It is a little superficial, but the parent still has that concern. So it's really hard to bite your tongue.
Right. Or I think there are ways to talk about that without it feeling judgmental and accusatory, just like trying to approach it as a therapist would. And if you can, and really just say like, Okay, so tell me about his children and like, how is that? And do you get along with them? Have you spent a lot of time with, just sort of see how they respond to it? Because maybe these children are amazing, and maybe that's a big reason why they like this person, and maybe they're excited about, having a bigger family, and you never know. So I think it's just about asking questions and listening.
Yeah, I think the best piece of advice I've gotten through therapy is just to be curious instead of judgmental about
Yes.
people.
I like that. Curious instead of judgmental.
Yeah. And that's helped me socially, honestly. I feel like I'm really judgmental if I feel like, oh, I don't like this person's values or whatever, or I don't know. And that can be really inhibiting for me in terms of just having a good time, or maybe meeting somebody interesting, or, sometimes my therapist tells me to, when I'm in a social situation where I feel like I'm around people that I quote unquote don't share values with, think of it as like research or think of it as, writing or gathering material for characters to write a story about or something. Not in a way that's, mean and or like David Sedaris like, but just, I don't know, just being curious about people and asking questions. I don't know, almost anthropologically. I find that helpful.
I think that's great.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is putting a little distance sometimes between what's happening and our feelings about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, I want to ask Carrie about social media. Carrie, you seem so skilled at social media. I follow your Instagram, and now I follow your podcast one, and I love little things you do. Like recently when you guys skipped a couple episodes, I think because you were having a family reunion, you had a little meme or something that said, please forgive us, or I forget what it was. I thought, why can't I do stuff like that? But anyway, I think social media is one of the worst things our society has, and yet we all do it. So how do you balance that, being so good at it, and then you talk on your podcast about having to fit in and being, and girls and all that kind of thing. And to me, social media plays so much into that. How do young adults deal with that conflict?
Well, I actually deactivated temporarily disabled my own Instagram account.
Oh,
I mean, I still have I did that this week just because I was feeling depressed and like the sky was falling, because for me it was, because my ceiling fell out. But I'll sometimes do that, and it's actually nice. But I mean, yesterday I was looking at the podcast Instagram, and I follow lots of people on that. And when I delete Instagram, then I end up spending all this time on TikTok. I think, but I think TikTok is a place that makes me happier than Instagram does, because it's weirder, and I think people don't care as much about their followers or like their ratio or whatever. Anyway, I think social media is bad. I don't need to think dialectically about it. I think by and large it's a bad thing. I think it desensitizes us to the suffering of others. Shout out as always to Susan Sontag. I think it I don't know, it fosters a lot of misery. The other night I found myself looking at pictures of, I don't know, some girl. I don't even know how I ended up on her profile because I don't know her, but for a while looking at pictures of her and feeling, wow, I feel so bad about my body. And I feel like such a loser. And I think that that's mostly what social media can do. I mean, I don't know. On the other hand, I do have fun with social media. I think I also don't really overthink it. Maybe sometimes that means that I overshare. But I think it can also be, for me, it's been, I don't know, a platform to share my personality or interests or causes that I care about.
Do you see how parents of adult kids could worry about it when they see their kid depressed or not living up to their potential because they've given up because everyone else seems to be doing so much better than them? All that sort of stuff plays into social media.
I mean, yeah, I feel like this often, and I felt it very acutely this past week, where I just felt I am unsuccessful. I don't know what I want to do with my life. I have friends who seem to have it all figured out, who are my age, who are younger than I am. And social media definitely is often what triggers those feelings. And talk about feeling unmotivated. I think in those scenarios, I'll feel stuck instead of feeling like, oh, this person's doing that. I should really actively be trying to get my life together, or I should, go to a cafe and write today. I haven't written in a while. Instead, it'll be just, I want to close the blinds and turn off the lights and spend the day in bed, because what's the point if I'm never going to be like this person?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think it's a real struggle. How about you, Ellie? What do you feel? Do you have a social media account?
Yeah, I do. I don't love social media. I totally echo Carrie. It makes me feel less than and insecure and inadequate and excluded a lot. I think you're looking at your friends, they're all doing fabulous things that, sometimes you weren't invited to. And
Right.
there are so many, young women in particular who are perfect looking and have amazing lives and jobs and have just figured out a way to, spend a Wednesday in February, like traveling somewhere amazing while you're working.
Right.
And you are doubting your life choices. And I think I was kind of burned by social media a bit. We talked about this on the podcast, but I had some photos taken from my Facebook and given to Gawker when I first joined the Yale University network, which was really creepy. And so ever since then, I've just sort of tried to be way more selective about what I put out online. And, we talked about how I have awful anxiety and used to get so hurt by, negative comments about our mother. And the way people are just picked apart and the amount of vitriol on places, especially like Twitter. I've never had a Twitter, which is crazy, I know. But also seeing the way it's burned people. I never wore a racist Halloween costume, but it just seems like people,
Yeah.
it feels like the more you put yourself out there, the more vulnerable you are. So I've never really been that into it. I have an Instagram. I will go months for a time. I'll delete the app from my phone if I feel, because at least now I have the awareness to understand, like, why am I so depressed after being on this? Why am I so depressed right now? Oh, maybe because you just spent an hour on Instagram, and that affects you. So I will go through an Instagram cleanse. I recently just joined TikTok though. And I have to say, I have no idea how to make the videos, but TikTok makes me really happy. It definitely is a time suck. TikTok is great because it just gives me what I want. And I don't really follow a lot of famous people or my friends on it. I get a lot of cooking content, a lot of illustrators and paintings and puppies and just funny, weird commentary from people you've never seen or will probably ever see ever again. It's this weird community that doesn't make me feel bad about myself. So I'm into it.
Interesting, because I just went on TikTok too. I've never posted anything. I'm just a looker like you.
Same. Voyeur. Yeah, no, I think it is about protecting yourself. I will be like, why am I still in this person's feed? Like, I need to get out of here. You literally have to like pinch yourself and come back down to earth and get out of the phone sphere, the social media vacuum, and pull yourself out. You really just have to be aware that this is affecting your brain.
Right. It's so hard though, because my daughter actually told me there's you can set your time limit on TikTok.
Yes, you can, which I think is genius.
In a day, you can't be on it more than whatever, it cuts you right off. Okay, let's wrap this up. After this conversation, if you had to leave our listeners with 2 or 3 takeaways, what would they be?
Be curious about other people and think dialectically.
Yeah, I think Carrie's taught me a lot about dialectical thinking. And anytime I'm dealing with an issue with a friend, she'll just say, be curious, just be curious, which I think is really great. I've also, throughout the past few years, getting closer to my sister, I've been able to let go of other relationships in my life that aren't really serving me because I have this built-in best friend, and she showed me what real unconditional love is. And so I've been able to detach with love. That's another one that my friend taught me, which I think is great. And like, it's okay if someone's not serving you and a friendship has run its course. Like, it's okay. And it doesn't need to be this big dramatic blow up. It's just, you're an adult and you can take the space you need from people who don't serve you. But that doesn't really have to do with parents. But
no, yes, it does. Yes, it does. That's great.
Yeah. And I think just having patience and kindness and understanding for each other, compassion as much as you can, knowing that people are going through so much more than what you see, and just trying to have compassion and forgiveness.
That's terrific. You guys, thank you so much.
Great.
All right. Thank you for replying to my email. Good luck with everything.
Thank you for having us.
Yes. Thank you for having us, and let's keep the conversation going.
Thank you so much, Ellie and Carrie. I really enjoyed talking to you and hearing that building sibling closeness is a journey. And I certainly commend you two for working so hard to make it work and realizing the importance of family. And despite your proximity to fame, you sound like such grounded young women, and we so much appreciate you spending this time with us. I'll certainly put a link to your podcast in our episode notes and encourage all of our listeners, please listen. It's a great podcast.
They were terrific, and I particularly enjoyed learning about how they dealt with getting a stepfather as young adults. I think we summed it up well, and hope listeners understand that whether it be a divorce or death, there is a break in the family fabric, and everyone deals with this differently. I think Carrie spoke about being curious rather than judgmental. I love that. It's great advice for all of the relationships in our lives, but especially for those relationships that are the most important in our lives, those with our children.
Absolutely. But Ellen, before we close, I need to ask listeners to please support our podcast. It's the only way we can keep going. Visit our website, click the big yellow button on the right side that says support us. There's options as low as $5. So help us out. The website is biteyourtonguepodcast.com. Thanks also to Paul D., who recently bought us a few cups of coffee. Thanks, Paul. It means a lot. Once again, thank you so much to Connie Gorant-Fisher, our audio engineer. The next episode drops in 2 weeks, and it's actually with the author of the book, Don't Bite Your Tongue. It's a good one. Thanks for joining us. In the meantime, remember though, sometimes you do have to bite your tongue.